who tell me their stories each and every day about losing their job, individuals who are afraid about Social Security, individuals who are veterans, law enforcement individuals, and people who are afraid about their loved ones being deported and separated.
As you mentioned, inflating assets, there would be certain assets that would be X, and he would just say they are Y. Just put kind of a bunch of fraudulent and fake numbers to those assets. Now, I want to talk about some of the specific cases that your Attorney General's office is involved in, but in that case against Trump,
Trump just got absolutely wrecked by the one person he couldn't intimidate or bully, New York Attorney General Letitia James. While he's busy tweeting that it's all rigged, she's out here showing exactly how she caught him inflating his assets by billions. The funniest part? Every time Trump opens his mouth about the case, he digs himself deeper. James stays cool as a cucumber, while Orange Man has complete meltdowns about the $486 million judgment. The contrast is both hilarious and revealing. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now back to the video. Trump's favorite con isn't just for fooling banks anymore, he's bringing his number-fudging talents to Washington. You know that thing where he told everyone Trump Tower has 30 extra floors? Well, that same magical math is now being applied to our government's finances. Let's be real about what Letitia James uncovered. Trump didn't just add a few zeros here and there on his financial statements. We're talking about properties magically tripling in value overnight. His Trump Tower penthouse suddenly grew from 11,000 square feet to 30,000 square feet. And Mar-a-Lago? That went from being worth $75 million to a whopping $739 million when it suited his loans. It's like watching a fish story where the catch grows bigger every time he tells it.
And so I've got a duty and an obligation to defend the rule of law. I took an oath to the Constitution and not to, and contempt for the law, contempt for individuals who work each and every day to serve our government, contempt for Congress. Republican members have just rolled over and allowed. But it is my intention, obviously, to ensure that the rights and privileges of New Yorkers are respected, and to use the law both as a sword and as a shield, particularly to protect vulnerable and marginalized populations and individuals.
But here's where it gets scary. The same guy who can't count his own square footage correctly now wants to make up numbers about our social programs. Trump's latest mathematical masterpiece? Claiming there's $400 to $600 billion in fraudulent payments in Social Security. Not million, billion, with a B. Seriously, where did that number come from? Did he use the same calculator that told him his net worth was $10 billion? When reporters tried to get to the bottom of this creative accounting, Trump's press secretary Caroline Leavitt gave the most honest answer in Trump administration history. That's what they think the numbers are. Insert cartoon trombone sound. Not actual data, not government research, just vibes. They think that's the number. The same way I think I should be a billionaire by now, but my bank account disagrees.
You know, he engaged in this pattern and practice of illegality. And it was following a 2-year investigation after, hearing individuals, witnesses before a hearing. Listen, we brought the case against Donald Trump, who was then a civilian, because he inflated his assets for the purposes of taking advantage of low interest rates and insurance rates. After a hearing, we secured a judgment, and the interest rate continued to increase, and we are awaiting at this point in time a decision from the appellate division of the state of New York. And now what he is doing is causing more chaos, confusion.
Meanwhile, Letitia James sat down with the Meidas Touch Network and calmly explained the actual fraud pattern. He inflated his assets for the purposes of taking advantage of low interest rates and insurance rates. No drama, no screaming, just laying out facts like an actual professional. What a concept. The contrast couldn't be more stark. On one side, you've got James methodically explaining financial fraud in a measured tone. On the other, there's Trump at rallies screaming about witch hunts and how he's the most persecuted person in American history. It's like watching a chess master play against someone who's eating the pieces. Trump's approach to numbers has always been creative. Need a building to be worth more? Just add some floors. Need it to be worth less for tax purposes? Suddenly it's practically worthless. This is the same guy who once valued his brand at $4 billion. Apparently, his name written in gold is worth more than most countries' GDP.
Elon Musk and his musketeers, obviously, to gain access to our private and personal information. He's throwing everything against the wall to see what sticks. And it's basically a brazen attack on our democratic system of government, the king. And that's what we are doing each and every day. It was not my intention to resist. And so he would like to allege that it was politics, but it really wasn't. It was based on facts and the rule of law. So we were able to secure a summary judgment, and then...
As James explained in her interview, Trump's strategy is simply to throw everything against the wall to see what sticks. That's his entire playbook, whether it's business or government. Throw out enough lies and hope people get too exhausted to fact-check them all. It's like trying to play whack-a-mole with falsehoods, except the moles are wearing MAGA hats and screaming about election fraud. But here's where the scam gets really dangerous. These made-up numbers aren't just for bragging rights anymore. They're being used to justify slashing programs that millions of Americans depend on. The same fraudulent math that got Trump favorable loan terms is now being weaponized to argue for cutting Social Security and Medicare. Same trick, much higher stakes. If Trump says there's $600 billion in fraud, then guess what gets put on the chopping block? The programs that help the elderly, disabled, and vulnerable. It's like claiming your house is infested with unicorns, so you need to tear it down. The problem doesn't exist, but the solution sure benefits certain people, namely, those who've wanted to dismantle these programs for decades. And it's not just Social Security. Remember when he claimed millions of undocumented immigrants were voting? Or when he said COVID would disappear like a miracle? Or when he drew on a hurricane map with a Sharpie? It's all the same playbook. Make up numbers, repeat them until people get tired of fact-checking, then use those numbers to justify whatever you wanted to do in the first place. As the legal walls keep closing in on Trump, Letitia James reminds us what's really at stake here. Have some steel in your back, she told citizens, delivering a wake-up call that should make even the sleepiest voter sit up straight. Democracy isn't something that just happens while we're scrolling through TikTok videos of dancing puppies. It requires our active participation. James hit the perfect note when she pointed out there are more of us than there are of those in the White House. That's right, the fraudsters and con artists are actually outnumbered by regular folks who don't like being lied to. Imagine that! Want to fight back against government corruption? You don't need a superhero cape. Show up at local town hall meetings, share your stories, and demand transparency. Trump might be the king of making stuff up, but we don't have to play along with his fantasy land math. All it takes is some backbone and a functioning BS detector.